5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay.
Hello everybody, this is the Data Science Virtual Chapter, and I'll just hand over to our Virtual Chapter leader, who is Mark Tabladillo.
Yes, greetings everyone, and hope everything's going well where you are. It's afternoon in the U.S. and evening in European time. We're glad that you could join us for the initial meeting here of the PASS Data Science Virtual Chapter. And I'm very excited with my co-leader Jen Stirrup, who will be presenting today. And as we see the screen here, we have the chance to register for the PASS Business Analytics Conference. It's going to be happening here in the U.S. If you want to save $150 off the registration, then you would use our unique discount code. And I see it doesn't show on this slide, but go ahead and feel free to email or contact us, because we do have some codes for you to be able to save money on that conference. But that will be coming up, and perhaps Jen will say more about that.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't manage to get a code in time, but I'll tell you a secret. If you email me directly at jen.stirrup@simplepass.org, I've got the largest discount possible to give away. So please, please, please do email me or tweet me at Jen Stirrup. Or if you contact Mark, he'll forwards the email to me, and
Yes.
I'll see what I can do for you. So that's just our way of saying thank you for joining up with the Data Science Virtual Chapter. So please don't hesitate to get in touch.
Right. We also have an audience question if this will be recorded, and we are going to be recording today's presentation, and we will be posting it to our brand new YouTube channel, so that will be available coming up. The second slide here we have is the upcoming conference in Copenhagen. Wonderful city. I've been there several times myself, and although I don't plan on being at this particular conference, certainly recommend, especially if you're in the European regions, to go. You'll have 600 people perhaps at this conference, MVPs. Jen, are you going to be at this conference?
Yes, I am. I'm speaking actually on detecting fraud in data. So it's a subject I find really interesting. So I'm talking about that. I'm really excited about that, and hopefully we'll see people there. Hopefully we'll see you there.
Yeah, wonderful conference. So you get to hear Jen talk about fraud detection with some advanced analytics. Okay, next slide. So we have a number of virtual chapters. We are among some of the ones that have our logo. Where's our logo on here? I don't see it on there. I guess we're too new.
We're
the newborn. Yeah, so we're kind of not on this slide right now, but there are many virtual chapters. We recommend that you join the mailing list through the regular PASS website. You see the link there at the bottom, and you can find out about them. So we can go forward. And we have some upcoming SQL Saturdays in the U.S. and also internationally. Some of the ones that will be in European areas include Vienna and Budapest, and we also have ones across the U.S. coming up. SQLSaturday.com. Volunteers, we enjoy having people volunteer. Jen's volunteering today. I'm volunteering. We have also 3 other helpers. We have just for this virtual chapter, but they also serve in other areas. Jen also serves on the PASS board. There's many ways to get involved. We encourage it both to be good citizens in the tech community, but also make professional contacts. So it's a good way to connect with people just beyond just going to these video sessions.
That's true, because the very first time I went to a past event, I didn't really speak to anybody. And I'm actually really glad that I did, and then I started to get involved. And it's really changed my life personally because I have so many friends now that I didn't have before. So Mark and I are now friends. If we never met Mark, we wouldn't be doing this. And it's just really an exciting thing to do. So don't worry about feeling shy, because I'm actually tremendously shy. And I just manage it better. I've never got rid of it. So it's a great way just to dive in and get to know people and learn so much as well.
Yeah, and not everything is necessarily public presentation. There's a lot of jobs which require people just to do things behind the scenes. And so there's a variety of things. We want you to stay involved. Find people on LinkedIn and on Facebook. We have an area there. Twitter feed for SQL Pass centrally. And then always point people to the main website, SQLpass.org. The reason it's free is because we do pay for these events due to income we receive through conferences and also our generous sponsors. And so PASS also is looking always for sponsors. All right, so as we get into this presentation, I'll give you a little bit about Jen Stirrup, and I don't have a bio to read for her, but she is a SQL Server MVP, proudly from Scotland. And we have known each other for a few years, and we both volunteer and speak at many conferences. So Jen has often talked about areas in Microsoft Business Intelligence. She's here to talk today about Introduction to Statistics and R for Rookies. And this is going to be the first of several presentations, but I'll let Jen tell you more.
Thank you for that. Yes, I always forget when I'm presenting to introduce myself, which is why I always forget a bio slide, because I reckon that's not the important bit, so I just forget. So thank you very much, Mark, for hosting the session. As we said, it is recorded. We'll be putting it on our YouTube channel, and we'll be sending out an email in due course to let you know where everything is. Now, the motivation for doing this course is that I'm a business intelligence expert, I guess, and well, certainly I feel my way around the subject, and I'm learning all the time, to be honest. And what I found was I often go into organisations where I don't know the data because I am a consultant, and I find usually that the IT department doesn't know the data, they look after it, and the business analysts don't tend to get their hands on the data at all. So then I come in and I befriend the IT department, and I befriend the business analysts, and what I start to do is find holes in the data, and I tend to find them fairly quickly. It doesn't always make me very popular when I'm on site, because my newfound friends aren't quite so happy that I've suddenly found all these problems in their data, but that's what I'm there for. I wouldn't be doing my job unless I questioned everything. And to do that, statistics is a tool, basically. It helps me to discover problems or issues in the data. It also helps me to debunk other people's theories about why certain things happen in the organisation. And when I present on statistics or R, anything like that, when I look at the audience, because I'm down the front, I've got a brilliant view of everyone. What I do tend to find is I see a lot of confused faces. So I might speak to someone and say, well, let's talk about the median for a moment. And I can see about half the audience, the eyes open a bit, and I know they're all thinking, gosh, I haven't talked or looked at any statistics since I was in high school, and I've forgotten everything. And sometimes you find there's a few people in the audience that remember all of their stats, and they use it a lot. But generally I thought there's a need for people to learn this, and that's why we're here today. We're going to look at a few things, and the series is going to last for 5 weeks. So we're going to talk about statistics and how we do these in R. We'll look at descriptive statistics. Don't worry about all these terms. We're going to learn about them over the next 5 weeks. And we're going to look at independent events. Again, then we'll explain what those are, probably in week 3. And we'll look at probability and regression. We're obviously not going to be able to cover absolutely everything in 5 weeks. But this course is really aimed at the BI or the BA person who has worked with data for a long time and could really do with a refresher on statistics. And the way to do that, I thought, well, why not learn some R along the way? As we know, Microsoft have bought Revolution Analytics, so why don't we start to have a little look at why this is relevant for us. So that's what we're going to do. We'll learn some statistics and we'll learn some R, and hopefully have some fun. So references and thanks. This is an excellent reference, R in data mining, examples and case studies. If you just want to work through examples yourself and want some more in-depth investigations on what we were able to cover in this course, I recommend you download this particular file. It's a PDF file, and I'll tweet it out after the session is finished, but it's something that I found extremely useful, and we will look at some of the examples from that throughout. So why is R popular? Well, it's certainly growing. When I first started talking about R, I used to say R had 5,000 add-on packages. So what's an add-on package? Well, for those of you who use Excel, and will keep using Excel as a springboard, when you use Excel, you get various add-ins that you can use in order to make more out of your data. And we've got things like the data mining add-in, which I think Mark has talked about previously in the past, and you get all sorts of visualization add-ins as well. And in Excel, what you do is you go to the Windows Store and you pick your add-on, you pick your download, and off you go. So it's similar to iTunes. Well, R has got the same thing. There's a number of add-on packages that you can install, and R helps you to do that. Now, as I said, the 6,100 is growing all the time, and don't be afraid of having a look around them. There's lots and lots of extensive documentation, and it's pretty useful. There's 41,000 plus members of LinkedIn's R group, and again, it's another great resource which we can use, and that should help us to try and connect with other people who are using R as well. Now, there's over 170 meetup groups, and hopefully that should help you to connect with other people as well. So why do we use statistics at all? Well, statistics are not the be-all and the end-all. What we do find is you need to visualize the data as well. And another reason I found statistics so useful is because with data visualization, what happens is it can be so easily fooled by the data. And what that means is that you can look at the pictures and be fooled by it, but the same way sometimes you can look at the statistics and be fooled by that as well. So if we were to take these data points, you'd find that the average of these were the same. But when you plot the data points, what you do find is that the actual data points look very different. So statistics on its own is a wonderful tool, and so is data visualization, but you can put them both together in order to understand the data very, very well. It's a very interesting concept if you can use both together. So here's an example where data visualization doesn't go quite right either. So it looks good, doesn't it? We see the yellow line and we see the red line, and they're fairly close together. And you think, well, those two items must be related to one another. But is it correct? So the red line shows the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets, and the yellow line shows the total revenue generated by skiing facilities in the United States. Now, so what this tells you is that although the visualization seems to indicate these two things are related, a healthy chunk of common sense tells you that actually, probably, in fact, these are not related. But that's what is fun about numbers, I think, is that you can mix numbers together. Sometimes you find patterns that are not there, or that should not be there. And if you team up statistics with data visualization, then you've got two great tools in order to really expose and understand the data. But sometimes the numbers are not enough. So here we have the same chart that I just showed you, but I've put the data in a table. And what I've done here is when you put something in a table, you start to lose the pattern in the data. So why do we use R? There are plenty of other data analysis software available. Well, R is used by about 2 million plus people. It's used by data scientists, which is why we're talking about it here, and we use it because it's a fairly powerful statistical programming language. It's really flexible, and actually you probably see R a lot. If you use R, for example, as part of, you look at the New York Times, if you look at Twitter, and look at flowing data, also Facebook use R as well. So there's plenty, if you are thinking of using R in your organisation, there's plenty of good companies, well-known companies out there that are already doing just that, and you're joining good company. Now it is open source, which means that it's free. It's leading edge analytics research, and actually 70% of people in data science use R. People learn it in university as well, and because they're using it in university, they come out, they graduate, and they're familiar with R, so it's just going to get more and more popular. So you can see there's a real growth in demand. R is the highest paid IT skill, according to dice.com. R is the most used data science language after SQL. SQL and R are very powerful together, and again, R is used by 70% of data miners. So at the moment, it's number 15 of all programming languages. It's not going away anytime soon. It's growing faster than any other data science language. Now, R is in memory and limited to the size of data you can process. But now that Microsoft have purchased Revolution Analytics, what you'll find is hopefully R will go, and you could use Azure as a backdrop for your data. And what that means is it will be scalable, so you could add in more data and have more fun with R. And what us data people like is data, obviously, but what we really want is more and more data. We can never have enough of it. So what do we test when we look at data? Well, basically, what we want to do is test whether something is true. Sometimes, for example, if it's marketing data, you might have a few samples. You might want to know, well, what happened during my website testing? What website design turned into more click-throughs, for example, or which website design out of option A or option B, which one actually generated more registrations? So when we have something like that, we can use R to work out, well, we've got our sample data. We want to know which one generated more click-throughs, and was it significant or not? Was there something in it? And when we do that, we state a hypothesis. The null hypothesis says that nothing happened. There was no difference at all. The alternate hypothesis says that something did happen. And then it usually warrants further investigation. So we set to prove out in statistics that something did happen. And we look at the distribution of the data. So what we'd start to do is, and we'll look at this next week, is we will look at what is the pattern of the data, how does it look? Because that helps us to decide what statistical test we're going to use, and there are lots and lots of statistical tests in the same way that there are lots and lots of R packages. Then we look at the p-value, and we're going to talk more about that, but keep that in your head. We are very often just looking for a few numbers when we do statistics. Now, we don't actually always need to ream out lots and lots of data. We're just trying to crunch the data down into a summary, and that summary tells us a lot about the data. So what we're going to do is, if you haven't done so already, I recommend that you have a look at installing R and installing RStudio. I'm just going to show you what those look like. Sorry. Align to the show, get rid of that. And what I'm going to do is bring up some websites. Yep, there we go. Now what we have here is, I'm just going to start Zoom it as well. So I hope you can see this all right. I'm just going to start up Zoom it too. Now what this actually does is, this is the R website, and it is rprojects.org. So, and what I do recommend is, if you want to learn stats in R, this is a wonderful, wonderful resource. It's not just that you can download R from it. it is there, r-project.org. What we can see here is on the left-hand side, lots of documentation. Now, when you're learning something new, it's always good to know where do we go for help. Lots and lots of documentation here. So I really recommend that our website is a great place to start. So here's just some examples on the site of what R actually looks like. And there's some news down here. So for example, there's some user conferences. There's one in Denmark at the end of June going into the beginning of July. And there's one in California as well, Los Angeles, on just at the same time actually, so you have a choice. Now, when you install R, this is a very, very simple download. The interesting thing is R on its own doesn't really look very nice. Basically, it's just a console, and we'll have a quick look at what RStudio looks like. If you install R, I recommend that the next thing you do straight away is install RStudio. What RStudio does, you can download it here. Let's see if that takes us through to the page. What RStudio does, and there's a small video here which I'm not going to play for you, you can look at that yourself. RStudio is actually free, so for the virtual chapters, RStudio you can see there. Here's the website for RStudio. Which we have at the top here. And RStudio is simply rstudio.com. So what you do is you would install R, which you can get from here, and here's the download link just down here at the bottom to download R. Even says on it, download R. There you go. Now I'm assuming people are using Windows, and I did hold a course once when somebody said, look, I want to use Linux, it's all I have. So I sympathised and then said, well, I'm sorry, I don't know any Linux, because that's true, I don't tend to use it very much. And I sometimes get people to do that for me, just because they're the experts and I do what I do and they do what they do. So when we click on the download button to download R, what you see here, the R website, now we've got this thing here called CRAN. And what that means is the Comprehensive R Archive Network. And that basically gives you all of the information that you need about R. It's very generously hosted by different locations around the world. So I'm located in the United Kingdom. So I would probably download R from one of the mirrors here. If you're in the United States, you can see that all of these American institutions have very generously donated their server space and their network for us to download it. So say, for example, I wanted to download it here from the University of St Andrews. What we've got here is to download R for Windows. And very helpfully, there's a link here. Well, this is what you want to do when you want to install R for the first time. So it's actually very helpful. So when you download R, I'm just going to save it just now. In fact, no, I will run it. You can see here it's very, very quick download. 20% here. So while that's downloaded, what you could do is go back and download RStudio. And RStudio is like the user-friendly way to learn R and to use R. More or less everybody I know who uses R uses RStudio as well. And the reason for that is it's just much nicer interface, it's easier to use. We live in the world of GUIs and making things easy for ourselves. So that's what RStudio gives you. So in the version of RStudio you want would be RStudio Desktop. And like R itself, RStudio is free. And you can go and download that there. So again, you just download that. Oops. So now that R itself is downloaded, that was my initial download here. Basically you set it to English, or if you're using English you may not be. And basically it's just a bunch of wizards. You should be able to do this. I'm not going to do it again. But you get the idea, you just click through next for everything, leave all the defaults, and off you go. It's the same with RStudio. The only thing I would say is watch the bitness. So should I run 32-bit or 64-bit? Obviously only relevant if you're using 64-bit Windows. And if I were you, if this is relevant to you, I would read the documentation. Yeah. And the reason that's relevant is if you download RStudio, you'll need to download the correct bitness of RStudio as well. So just be very careful of that too. Now, I don't know about you, but if you look up information in R in the internet, it's a really difficult thing to search for. So what we see here, now RSeek is actually a subset of Google, which has been set aside and dedicated for people to search specifically on topics which are related. As you can imagine, if you search for the term R on the internet, you will be there for a very long time wading through lots of irrelevant information. That's no good to anybody. So if you use rseek.org, that will give you basically another way of trying to find information about R. So let's take, for example, let's look up World Bank. So what you see here is I've looked up World Bank, which is a very well-known data source, and what we can look here is there's a whole bunch of packages. I'll just use this as an example, and what the World Bank data gives you is the ability to produce graphs which look like this. Perhaps not as squished up as that one. I think that's probably the picture more than anything else. But you get the idea. R itself is some fairly sophisticated visualizations, and it's worth just spending some time to have a look through RSeek and just wade your way around it. You can do some nice things with it. And what I love about R is there's so many different ways that you can actually find information about it. And if you go, for example, to rbloggers.com, this is a great resource. I recommend that you follow them on Twitter, and you also sign up for their emails as well. You'll get a nice email every day. Oh look, there's me. You and 20,000 other people like our bloggers. And that's nice, and there's Jen Underwood there from Microsoft. That's really nice. So there's lots and lots of different ways you can learn about R, but I hope that gives you some insights into where to get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look at RStudio. So to do that, I'm just going to do a search. RStudio. There we go. So I'm just going to show you, first of all, we'll have a look through the interface itself. Now, if you've installed R, and you've installed RStudio, I know I'm speeding through this, but I don't know where people are at the moment. We will put this up later, so if you got to the point where you have downloaded R in RStudio, when you open RStudio, it will probably look something like this. I'm going to go through each point at a time. So what we have here is, I will just generally look at the console overall, so don't be too worried about the actual charts and graphics that you see at the moment. The top left hand side here is all about if you are writing a script in R. Now at this point sometimes I see people go, oh, and the reason they do that is because they didn't expect R to be console, and unfortunately it is. So RStudio is your best bet of making R as user-friendly as possible. So what we have here is your scripts actually end in .r. And the actual commands that you've run are actually down here in the bottom left-hand side. Oops. So what we have here is sometimes, because you are using a console, you need the history of what you actually did. And that's over here at the right-hand side, top right-hand side of the screen. don't worry too much about the code. We will be looking throughout code as we start and go through this series. I know it looks like an awful lot at once if you're not used to looking at console code, but don't worry about it. We're going to start to wade our way through it, and hopefully we'll get you getting some practice in as well. Alright, so what we're going to do is we've looked at RStudio. Another thing to note here is the help facility here. So what we do here is you've got help down the side here. So help itself is actually embedded in RStudio, and that's really handy because it just means that you can do your own little search. See, we look for World Bank. Something like that. You can do a pop out as well. You can find in the topic, say we want to find something like append. And then if you want to search for something, a different topic, say we look for World Bank again. What we can see here are some of the packages or files that our facilities found World Bank in. So it's actually quite easy to find help. What I like about this is you've got the help file on the left and the right hand side and the console on the left, so you can constantly refer to the help file as we proceed throughout your work. If you do any plots, you'll find them in here under the plots package. Now we spoke earlier about packages. Now R comes with over 6,000 packages now. You can go and download them all. So where do you start to find those? Well, what we can do is there's an install button just here. Here it is. So when we click on the install button, what we can see here is there's two different ways you can download packages. One is to do online, and that's the repository we saw earlier, the CRAN website, the Comprehensive R Archive Network. That's all that is, and it will go off and it will get the packages for you. Now you can type in the name of the package. Now of course with there being over 6,000 packages, there are a ton of them. So you can't be expected to know them all. I'd be really surprised and probably quite impressed or worried if you did know them all. So what you can do is start to do some auto-suggest packages to you. So your packages, we've got, say we type in something starting with R, you can see the packages that it's going to suggest to you. So here we have got, so if there's anything about Excel, yeah, there you go. So something like linking to Excel, for example. So it's worthwhile having a look at the packages. Now R has got a working directory, and what that means is, here's my working directory here. I left everything in default because I didn't need to move it anywhere else. And what I have here is my path to R's working directory. Basically that's where it saves all of its files when it's executing, and all of its configuration is in there. So what we can do is, I've got a little file here, and what I'll do is I'll share this. It will be over the weekend, and we'll send out an email out to the Data Science Virtual Chapter so we can find out where to pick up this file, where you can pick up the slide deck, and where you can pick up the recording as well. So don't worry too much about having to type everything in really quickly. Now all I'm going to do is, when you click on the line in the console and you press Control then Enter, what it does do, and that was quite quick, so what it does do is execute whichever command you've got, puts it in the console for you, and then goes off and does it. So R will do anything that appears in the bottom left hand corner here. That's exactly what that's for. So data is actually, R has got a lot of data sets that are installed with it. And these are very, very good for learning about R. They're just sample data sets. So we've got things here like road casualties in Great Britain up to the year 1984, and all sorts of different examples. And for some reason, and this one always makes me laugh, we've got the body temperature series of 2 beavers. Now then, if that wasn't enough, there's actually a different data set presumably with the body temperature series of 2 different levers perhaps. So there's all sorts of stuff in there, but again, these ones aren't very compelling. The one that we're going to look at is a very, very well-known data set, which is the IRIS data set. And if you do any search in the internet, what you'll find is there will be lots and lots of examples where this particular data set is used in R and used as lots and lots of examples. I don't know about you, but I learn best by examples. I learn best by doing. So if you go off and do your search in rseek.org, the website I just showed you, look up IRIS, you find tons of examples there. But I'm going to give you some examples anyway. So what this does here, and I've put in comments, so what you see at the top here, anything that starts with the hash or the pound sign, depending on what you call it, it loads sample data sets. And that's all data gives you. Yeah. So when you click on this line, do Control Enter, that makes this line jump down here, and R goes off and executes it. So we can see here it's also produced out a list of all the data sets that are available. So we can go off and look at those. So let's see what's actually in our data set. So what I've done there is I clicked on this particular line here, and that gives you the metadata. Basically it gives you the data about the data. So when you do Control and Enter at the same time, it's just a keyboard shortcut. What you find is we have some information down here, and that's where the output is. And that's the output which is produced in response to the command str, which is basically reads output for the IRIS dataset. So anything that goes between those brackets is the name of your dataset. Now, if you use reporting services, for example, or SSIS, you'll be very familiar with the term dataset anyway. Basically, it's a rectangular data source that will have rows and columns of data. And what we have here is, in our terminology, that's called a data frame. That's all that is. A data frame is basically a mix, usually, of numbers, here the decimals, and text as well. So basically it's a table of data that you can go off and do things with. Now, when things are a data frame, it's just actually R is very, very flexible. It will look at the data and try to work out what's the most appropriate for each of the columns that it sees. So what we have here is the name of the column first of all, and then it's got the data types. We can see each of them are a number, and then it gives you a sample of the data. Now the interesting thing here is that it's lovely to have a nice sample of the data. What I find is when I deal with business users, they don't always understand what the column name means, but they will actually understand exactly what the data means instead of the column names. So I think what the interesting thing there is that people really respond to the meaning of the data, and I like that about R. They've made it as easy to understand as possible. And we've got this thing here, species, and then we've got the factor. So a factor is basically an attribute or dimension. Yeah, that's all that is. So we're focusing on the IRIS dataset here, and there are different types of species within that dataset. Now normally we'd call that the dimension would be species, for example, and that's how we would mix and match our data. So basically a factor is a dimension. If you're used to analysis services or power pivot or something like that, and that's all that's for, that's species. So let's find out a wee bit more about the data. Now R is very, very useful for telling you lots about the data which is not immediately obvious. And the reason that's good is it tries to expose the data, and you can sometimes see problems in Excel formula, for example, because everything's been hidden away. But what I like about R is it gives you the opportunity to robustly test other people's data, and it also gives other people the opportunity to robustly test your data. So it increases the accuracy, and I think the teamwork also increases as well. You can all help each other, you can all share scripts, so it's very collaborative in what it's doing. So when we run this command, attributes in the iris, what it does is it gives us a number of items. Names, now this bit here is actually the column names. Sepal length, sepal width, petal length, petal width, and then the species. And we've also got the row names as well, so that's basically telling us how many rows are in there. We've got 150 rows. And down the bottom it tells us there's a data frame. Now R has got lots and lots and lots of data types. I will cover those in the next session, but for now just remember that a data frame is a data set and we are good to go. So we might actually want to see the data ourselves. So what we can do just down the bottom is if I type in iris. That's all I'm going to type in. Then I press return. And what you see is the data starts to disappear off the screen. Now there's never any substitute for seeing the raw data if you're trying to understand it on its own. So what you find there is the very first column is the sepal length, second one's the width, then it's the length of the petal, the width of the petal, and then it's the actual species of the iris itself. And so anytime you type in the name of a data set or a data frame, it will output all of the data for you. We're quite lucky here, there's only 150 lines. If there's any more than that, we might be in trouble. So say we're not sure exactly what type of data that is. So if we do class iris, that's a way of telling us we are using a data frame. So when we do that, we know we've got a mix of numbers and text in there. We might want to see what those column names are again. And we've got something really useful, column names. Just simply gives us the column names. Now these commands are really useful because they help you understand the data, but they're also very handy to execute as well. You might just want to some practice in using the interface, and that's what this is all about. It's getting a bit familiar with the interface and starting to look at the questions that you might ask of your data. Say you don't want to see all of the data in every columns. I don't know about you, but users often tend to ask for things like 160 columns of data in a reporting services report, and then have that for the last 5 years. So there's usually tons and tons of data in there. So what we want to look at is the iris petal length. So I'm just going to execute that command. And what it just gives you is just a sample of the data. It actually gives you all of the data for that particular column, which is basically the length of the petal for each iris. What we can do here is I'm going to give you the column names again. You can see that there's 5 column names. First of all, we have sepal length. Number 2 is sepal width. And the third one is petal length, and that's the third column. So if we just wanted to type the data from the third column, we could do iris and a hyphen and 3, and that basically says we want the information for the third column. And you can see that the output of iris petal length and column names, and iris with a comma and a 3, the output is absolutely identical. And that's because those two commands, iris petal length and iris down here, they're absolutely identical. Just different ways of referring to the same thing. And the power of R really is that R allows you to use variables and it allows you to use substitutions like that. So when we use the column name, you can see there's a small $sign in there. And what that says is iris is the data set, and that there's a column name coming after the $sign. The $sign basically just tells R that the next thing that comes after it is going to be a column name. Yeah, so that's all it is. It's data set name, then a dollar to indicate the next thing is actually a column name. And we do that when we don't want to retrieve all of the information. Now we can see the first 5 rows as well. Again, this is all about getting a bit familiar with the R interface. It's not always the easiest to try and understand, I think, particularly if you're used to something very simple like Excel. But what we might actually want to see is a summary of the data. Now we're going to talk more about this next week. Now what this starts to give you is the descriptive statistics about the data, which is all here. So again, this is our 5 columns. We've got sepal length, sepal width, petal length, petal width and the species. So what we have here, say for example we take the fifth column, you can see that the species are all there. And each column just gives you lots of information, for example, about, here we have the petal width. Now why do you need to know the min, the median and the mode anyway? Well, sometimes people don't look at things like the min and the max. So I did some work recently for the National Health Service in the UK, and they wanted to know the average bed days, the average time somebody with diabetes spent in hospital. But what I found is the average was something like 15 days or something like that, I can't remember. But what I found was that some of the data was wrong. So the minimum number of days should have been 0, but actually the minimum number of days actually came out as being at minus 150. And the reason for that was somebody had swapped the start date and the hospital release date around and put the wrong data in the wrong place. And you can only really pick that up, that very finite detail, and amongst a lot of data, if you start to look at the minimum and the maximum. If something looks strange to you, it probably is strange. So somebody spending minus 150 days in a hospital bed looks really strange to me, and that's where the hearty dog with common sense comes in. But you don't get to that business question until you've actually got to the point of looking at your minimum, your maximum and your median and your mean data points. We'll cover these in more detail next week, how to get them and what they mean. But that's something that's actually really useful. And straight away, if you see that the min looks funny, that tells you straight away that you've got dodgy data in there. And let's face it, there is dodgy data everywhere. And if you think your organisation does not have dirty data, that probably means that somebody somewhere hasn't looked hard enough. And it's always nice to be the one that finds it before somebody else does. Yeah. So if I were you, that's one of the useful things that I can give to your organisation. So what we can do is we can make a table of our species, and basically what this does is it tells us how many rows are Setosa, how many rows are the versicolor species, and how many are the Virginica series as well. That's all that tells you. So what we can do is I like data visualization, so I am going to entertain myself and you hopefully by starting to plot some of these. So this doesn't look very interesting, but what we have here is plot is really useful, and it will basically plot absolutely anything that you give it. So here what we've plotted is a petal length, we've plotted it against the petal width, and we've given it a title. So here in the bottom we've got the length, then we've got the width up the side here, given it a title. That doesn't tell us very much. Make it a bit more interesting. And the way that we can do that is by adding colour. So this is where the data visualization starts to come into the story, because we actually use colour to classify a lot. Think about a Rubik's Cube. I assume you know what the toy is. I think they've become fashionable again. So the puzzle is basically you need to put the cube back into its original colours. And it sounds super easy, but actually it's quite difficult. We use colour to classify all the time. Think of the Rubik's Cube as a great example of that. And here what we see is that we can see a cluster start to appear. What I want to do though is plot this, which is pairs. I'm going to turn that. And what that gives you is this. Now, for those of you who use Excel, you'll know that doing something like this is really, really tough in Excel. And what we have here is the axes are aligned, and that's really helpful. They should ideally be. Power View will align the axes for you. They're not totally aligned, but where they are different, then it's marked. Now, these sort of things are really useful because what we can see is that the length and the width, how they relate to each other, and the petal length and the petal width as well. So we can start to see patterns forming in the data. Now, I have to do a pie chart because everybody loves pie charts in the world apart from me. So what we can see here is a small pie chart, and it gives us the distribution at a very, very high level. It tells us how many were Setosa, how many were Virginica, and the other species that were versicolor. It's a very, very simple test, lets us know if we've got an equal representation. We can do 3D scatter plots as well. Now, we can do scatter plots in 3D and R too. That's in Excel, and other tools do it. This is a really simple one, but the one that I want to leave you with, which is my favourite one, because it's a bit of a toy, is you can actually plot this in 3D. Now I'm just going to finish our studio just now and come out of that. And I have to show you this because this is a toy. And what this does is it actually allows you to move around with the data. And that's what I like about R. Hopefully you can all see that. We can actually swivel that. And I think that's what's nice about it. You can actually swivel it right up if you wanted to. I know it's just a toy, but I am so impressed that you can do that. So of course you can't do that in the Excel. And that just lets you see the data in 3D format. It just allows you to play with the data. Now business users love playing with visualizations, and what we can see here is we've actually got the plot in our studio. We have it here down the right hand side, and then if you like you can actually plot it like this as well. And the way that we do that is just by calling out some of these libraries. Now when we use R, we install a lot of packages, and if you want to use any of the packages you have to call them as a library. If you are used to using something like C# or something like that, you're used to calling libraries, and here we're just calling the RGL library and plotting in 3D. And what we can do is we can save all of our commands to our history file. The commands to do that is here, and what that does is it just saves a history in case you won't need to use all of these commands at another time. That's all that for. And you can see what's in the history file because it's over at the right hand side over here. And these scripts, if you want to open them, all you do is go to File, then Open File, and then it will start to look at your R files. And there's mine in there. And that's the one that we're going to use. Alright, so what I'm going to do is go back to the slide deck and I will check for any questions. I don't see any at the moment. Now, just to summarise, if you're going to use R, definitely use RStudio as well. Don't be worried about the fact it's command line. You're probably used to using command line with SQL Server anyway. Again, it's just a different way of getting data out of something, basically, and analysing it. Now, the thing with R is power is it allows you to use variables. We'll start to look at those next week. And what we'll do is we'll start to look at some of the descriptive statistics and some really introductory statistics so you can start to do your own analyses. Now, we haven't gone into stats too much today because I thought the output of today is if everyone goes away and installs R and then installs RStudio, I will be happy just with that. And then we can start to have a play around with statistics when you've actually got some software installed. So I'm just going to go back to community news here. Oops. Sorry, that's going the wrong way. And what I wanted to say is if you need to contact me, I'm just going to edit this slide so you can see it. What I mean is actually contact me. Now contact me with any questions that you might have. Sorry, American keyboard, SQLpass.org. And we will slideshow from the current slide.
That's great.
So again, just a summary, that was a really basic summary to R. We'll look at statistics on its own next week, and we'll use R as some of the examples there. But hopefully what I've done is given you some insight into R is approachable, R is for everybody, and we will have fun analysing our data and finding things out about the data that no one else knows, and you'll be the one who actually finds that out. And any questions, my email address is there, jenstillup@sqlpass.org. And with
Sure.
that, go ahead.
Jen, we do actually maybe have a chance to answer one question, or if someone wants to type in a question in the chat window toward the bottom, feel free to type that in. Again, this is going to be the first of several sessions. Jen, maybe you could preview what else is coming in the future?
Sure, yes. I will pop that back in. Oops, sorry. Oh, there we go. I had my agenda here. Alrighty,
Okay.
so I've basically split this into 5 weeks. The reason I did that was I wanted it to be accessible. I thought I might lose people if it was over 12 weeks or something like that. And I wanted to aim it at the BI person and the SQL Server person, or someone who's interested in data science and business analytics, doesn't know where to start, and hopefully it will give you an appetite. So with this point, what we covered here is statistics, why they're useful, how to do these in R. So basically by that, I mean basically if you install it, you know where to find help on it, because R is very difficult to Bing search for. It gives you millions and millions of hits and none of them really what you want. And next week we will spend some time looking at descriptive statistics in more detail, showing how those are useful, visualising those, and I'll show you and let you know some of the pitfalls that I've seen in my own career where people haven't done that, and how to make sure that you can see the importance of that discipline as we move forward. And then we'll start to look at making tests in our data, hypothesizing how we can make our data more robust and more interesting by looking at things like the significance of the data and how to understand what those numbers actually mean. So when R puts out a p-value or something like that, how can we tell if something is significant or not? So we're going to demystify some of those numbers that we keep hearing about, F and P and that sort of thing. We're going to talk about those because those are actually, when you look at them, they're actually fairly simple. So that's what we're going to do. Then we're going to look at probability, so we'll have some fun there. And the truth is, you use probability probably every single day and don't realise it. So if you look at things like the weather forecast, or will I take an umbrella today, or even if you look at something like political scores, pundits, football scores, all these things, you probably use probability all the time. And finally we'll look at regression. And basically that asks the questions, how did we get the numbers that we've got? How did we get to this point? And then hopefully how we can move forward from there.
That sounds great. And I'm hoping everyone listening today, hope you'll follow Jen along with the series and plan to attend some of the future sessions. We are going to try to get this recording out quickly. As far as homework, Jen gave homework, and that was to go download R and install 64-bit if you can. Also R Studio, as she showed on the screen. You'd also want to follow up with some of the other resources that she had available. And I'm sure Jen would also love to hear from you during the week. If you have any questions, send them in. She's going to want to hear them. She's also on Twitter. Send in your questions, send in your feedback on these sessions. We want to make them valuable for all the attendees. I don't see that anyone really asked any additional questions, so I'll just thank Jen.
Sorry, I don't know if it's just come to me, but I've got a pile of questions here. I don't know if you can see them.
Oh, okay.
I'll just go through them if that's okay.
Sure, great.
The first question is, well, it's actually a comment from Donald Parrish. Thank you, Donald. He said he used the 3D Viz on a Mac in 1990. Expensive but nice for the time. I remember using a Sinclair about that same time. So, yeah, I'm a bit of a old computing geek, and I mean in the best possible way. So yes, it's great fun, I think. So the second question we had was from Jagan, who's asking, does R process data in memory? Yes, it does. And that's obviously a limitation. So what I would do is I would have a look at Azure ML, and I know that Mark has already done this for a separate VC session. If you look at Azure ML, it's got R in it, and when you start to use Azure, then obviously you can put more data in there, which means you can go and process more data. If you look at Revolution Analytics as well, they have got things like R Hadoop as a package, and that allows you to use Hadoop, which obviously gives you access to more data. Will we just
a quick comment on there. Some of the premium products, such as Revolution Analytics, actually work more like client server. So it is true that generally 99% of the time you're going to be running R in memory, but a premium product like Revolution Analytics will take some of the workload off from the client to a server environment.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I don't normally mention third-party products, but I thought, well, since Microsoft have bought Revolution, I'll forgive them. And then I'll talk about that.
Sure, because they're becoming part of the Microsoft family. And also,
yes,
independent of that, Revolution Analytics has given a lot of love to the open source community by providing a lot of free things.
Absolutely. They're also coming along to the Pass Back conference. They're giving a few sessions there. And one of the gentlemen actually wrote the R for Dummies book. I think his first name is Andre. I'm sorry, but I've forgotten his name. But there is an R for Dummies book, and one of the Revolution Analytics guys wrote that. Again, another great resource. And well, so Rohit has asked a question. Will we discuss the basics of R, like its functions in these classes? I hope that we will, Rohit. I'd like to be able to do that, and I think functions are important. Functions are so flexible. So I think we'll probably do that, but in the last week, so we build up to it. We've got quite a lot of ground, and I'm hoping to try and capture as much as we can in that time. So Dan English, hello Dan, says he loved the pie chart and the 3D plot. Yes, well I like that as well. I like playing with data. It's all fun, and I don't normally show pie charts, as you know. But I thought, well, you know, once I've got it out of the way, I've done it. We can now talk about Stephen Few and all of the great visualizations there. So can you please point to Basic Statistics Refresher Source Online? And that's Rohit again. Now I will give you a great example, and I was going to use this as a basis for looking at statistics, and I forgot to mention it earlier. We will talk about it now, and it is Khan Academy. So if you look up Khan Academy, there it is there. Start learning now. Now this is all free, so I'm signing with Facebook. Oh, all right then. So basically, if you go to Khan Academy, it's got subjects here, and then we can start to find there's some statistics courses in here. Probability and statistics. Yeah, that's the one. So if I were you, I would have a quick look at that under the math heading, and I'm British, so I say maths, but I understand everyone else in the world says math. You'll have to be with me. And look up khanacademy.org. And there's also some other great resources if you look over at Coursera as well. And again, these are all free. So what would you like to learn about? Statistics. And there's a whole ton of stuff here. So we've got data science courses, we've got myths and statistics, so you can actually cover a whole range of stuff in here. And so hopefully, if you look up coursera.org or Khan Academy, and that should give you a great background as well. And I would look up those. I'm just going to look at the questions again, sorry. So how do we create a data set? Now that's something I'm going to look at next week. That's from Anscombe. So I'm going to look at that next week, how we import data into R. We need to do that as the next step. I used just the default data sources at the moment. I just am really conscious that some people don't know anything about stats and some people know a lot. And I thought we'll just try and see what we can do in the hour. But that's something we'll cover next week. How do we create a data set, how do we import data, and how do we export it as well. So Anshu again, will a SQL Server table act as a data set? Yes it will, and we'll look at how we can access SQL Server in the next session. So you'll have to come back from that for that Anshu, I'm afraid, or look at the recording. So yes, Dan has mentioned the Coursera one as well, and I think that is them all. So I guess that's it. Yes, so I just wanted to say thank you very much to everybody who joined us today, and I wanted to say thank you particularly to Mark, who's the virtual chapter leader, and I wanted just to say thank you for taking on the ownership of the virtual chapter. I think the data science one could be really successful, and the fact we've got so many people attending in our first session tells me that I think we will be. Now I really hope you'll contact me if you've got any comments, queries or feedback, and I look forward to seeing you next time. So with that, I'll hand over. Mark, do you have any comments? Or?
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Jen. Loved this topic, some wonderful presentation, and of course I loved Coursera because it was founded by data scientists that teach at Stanford. So that's a great website, including Khan Academy. But thanks, Jen, for the presentation today. We'll look forward to having everyone attend next week, and also look forward to our YouTube sharing of this presentation. Bye for now.
Bye for now. Thank you, everybody.